Warner Brothers is fleeing to Japan, with the tattered remnants of DC in tow, hoping that the Japanese can somehow salvage the shredded remnants of what was once a very popular universe and setting. More popular, indeed, than Marvel. I know times have changed. As with the Harley Quinn isekai, which is quite the concept, I will say, not even being out yet, Warner Brothers is already planning to increase its output of animated series to 10 series per year. Now, bear you in mind that it's not 10 DC animated series, as Warner Brothers has actually been doing animated content for quite some time, including the highly disappointing Batman Ninja. Now, you'd think that the concept of Batman as a ninja would be a damn difficult one to get wrong, and yet they certainly managed. In large part because they were being way too goddamn careful with it as well, and not leaning into the absolute absurdity of the trope of it all. If Japanese anime is to save Warner Brothers, they need to just forget about Warner Brothers and just make it anime. And whether or not they have the intelligence and or balls to do so is yet to be seen. So why are they doing this? Well, in part, of course, it's because it's simply a lot more profitable. Japanese animation studios do tend to work their workers at starvation salaries. And when you've got a studio that can pump out like 6-7 projects a year at a fraction of the cost of a major movie title that takes years to even develop, well, your profit factor is probably going to be overall significantly higher, and a bomb is not going to affect you anywhere near as badly per title. Not to mention, the sheer produce itself, the sheer quantity of product, will be an insulation against failure. And as for the could it work, well, absolutely. Can we take these characters and reinvent them in World of Anime? Interesting sentence structure, but of course you could. Like, characters like the Joker and Harley Quinn probably would work pretty well in an isekai setting, honestly. The more jokish characters absolutely could, and the various DC animated movies have all done fairly well, and have all been fairly good, even though none of them have actually received any attention or marketing whatsoever. They're, in essence, kind of a lost universe of old-school cartoons that nobody really seems to know or care about, weirdly enough. And this is, of course, then put in immediate contrast to their Western releases, with The Suicide Squad, for example, which I actually kind of enjoyed, weirdly enough. Idris Elba was good in it, and John Cena as Peacemaker, or was it Peacekeeper? A hilarious character. I adored the two of them's chemistry. I didn't give a shit about Harley Quinn or any of the others, but those two and the Peacemaker TV show I thought were hilarious. But the audience of the Suicide Squad movie did not agree, with a worldwide total of, what here now? 168 million total, with a budget of 185 million. Yeah, that's not a very good piece of math right there now, is it? And even the biggest successes, like Aquaman of the Lost Kingdom, which raked in 434 million, and this is basically like the mainline cinema releases of DC these days, that probably earned, what, $200 million? Which isn't bad, it's not a flop, but you really expect a lot more of a return of investment on these kind of big blockbuster things, because not only do you, of course, need enough money to pay off the project, you need enough money to pay off the investors, and you need enough money to finance the next project. A profit of 100-200 million really just ain't gonna cut it, really. And this is also, of course, one of the problems with this, that you need so much money to make it profitable. And in a market where you are competing with Marvel, who does this bigger and better than DC does, yeah, you're gonna have a very hard time, and so moving to Japan makes a lot of sense. Also because Japan is not as infected with wokeism as the West is. Thus, your percentage chance of creating something of quality is significantly higher. But there is a very, very, very large but coming up here, because you see, the ESG and DEI nonsense has absolutely been moving into Japan for quite some time now, via the usual legislative measures. In other words, politicians that have perhaps received a little bit too much in the forms of financial aid from certain special interest organizations. This despite the fact that ESG in and of itself, as in the ESG funds, have not been doing well in Japan at all. As Japan is in this kind of weird halfway zone between woke and anti-woke, where they're looking towards the West, and on the one hand they're taking lessons like key factors for achieving diversity, equity and inclusion in Japan, and a whole heaping heck of a lot of general issue Western political bombardment, the likes of which we ran out of like 10 years ago. That we can't have zero tolerance of discrimination, more women in politics, the LGBTQ elemental P community is being victimized. We had this 10 years ago, and we now recognize it for the agitprop that it so clearly is. But in Japan, most of this stuff is still relatively new, even as the general populace is looking at this and going, what is this Western garbage? As, weirdly enough, the George Floyd protests in Japan didn't really garner all that much sympathy, weirdly enough. I mean, I think it's weirdly enough that it garnered as much sympathy as it did in the UK or France. We had George Floyd protests in Norway, goddammit. Oh boy. But this is absolutely beginning to make its way into Japan. The question is if they can also look at the West and go, oh boy, wow, that was terrible, and you're fighting back against it, so maybe we should just skip the whole 10-year culture war thing and just go full anti-woke immediately. We can hope, and there are already forces within Japan that is moving in that direction, and so long as those forces can manage to win out, then moving to Japan is probably a good idea, and probably something that most of the large studios are going to have to entertain. Star Wars sagas, for example, I actually thought was an excellent little idea of experimenting with Japanese animation, and it actually came up with several ideas that I would be very interested in seeing them explore further. Because here's the beauty of it. When you transport something into an anime form, you are somewhat obviously multiversing it, right? Because you are taking it in a completely different art style, you're taking it in a completely different direction, in a completely different language. The human brain is going to see that and instantly disconnect it from the mainstream universe of the setting, right? And so your ability to forgive mistakes and kind of lean into it and sign that waiver of non-belief or disbelief or whatever is a lot easier to do, meaning that you can actually enter into a fairly fresh setting even though it's technically old and enjoy it both from the old school setting and the new way. You could explore things that you hadn't really done so before. Again, I would love to see more stuff from the Empire's point of view. Less about the Jedi, less about the Rebellion, more about normal people, more about the Empire, more about its negatives and its positives. Again, just give me Band of Brothers, give me Gundam, basically, but as the Empire. Give me fucking TIE Fighter, goddammit! This would work so well, and due to the, again, disassociation, not disassociation, but the disconnect of the style of it all, you could explore completely different areas of this setting with more or less complete immunity to any damage it might do to the main setting. See aforementioned Batman in Japan acting like a ninja nonsense. You could go crazy with this. You know, Harley Quinn getting isekai level crazy. And that is exactly what DC needs. See, here's the problem. I mention this time and time again whenever I talk about this. Batman is 80 years old, plus at this point probably. He is positively ancient, he's a fucking fossil. And you've already done everything you could possibly do with Batman. You've done Batman as a dinosaur, so seriously, look it up. You've done Batman as a caveman. You've done Batman in steampunk. You've done Batman turns evil. You've done Batman turns evil in 17 different flavors. You've done Batman turns evil because he eats Superman powers. You've turned him evil because he ate the Flash's powers. You've turned Batman evil because it's not actually Bruce Wayne, it's actually his dad evil. Oh my Jesus. Or well, not evil, but using guns, you know? You've already used and abused Batman in every conceivable fucking way imaginable under the sun. So maybe, if you're already going to bend and break the character into 10,000 tiny little screaming pieces, give it to the Japanese and turn him into a fucking vending machine for all I know. Okay? Because this is one of the actual geniuses of Japan. With the sheer quantity of mud they fling at the wall in terms of anime and manga, there's always going to be some absurd idea that pops up that people look at and go, well, that was retarded, and they're gonna like it. Hell, the entire idea of villainesses animes and mangas has become tremendously popular was the idea of the classic otome game, a visual novel made for girls, right? You'd usually have the princess character, she'd appear in the world, and all of the princes would swarm to her, and there'd always be an evil villainess who'd bully the main character, and her getting her comeuppance was one of the big scenes of the show, right? Well, Japan, and Korea as well to a large degree, looked at that and thought, but what if I sympathize more with the villainess? And so an entire genre where the character is actually reborn as the villainess began emerging, and that became its own huge subgenre, just like isekai, which is everywhere, which... See, here's also one of the negative signs. The fact that they decided to make this an isekai, which is currently probably the single most oversaturated subgenre of anime and manga in existence, does not necessarily bode particularly well for the originality of further DC animated series, let's just put it like that. But it is a much broader and wider and frankly more diverse and open market for innovation, for coming up with new shit, for reinventing a series. And so when you have a very old, and let's be frank here, stale and stagnant setting as DC, which is struggling desperately to try and break through from the mire it's been stuck in for the last 10-20 years, yeah, giving it to the Japs is probably your best bet at getting out of that quagmire. So, all in all, I'm relatively positive. At the very least, they should give it a shot. What's the worst case scenario? That DC goes under? Oh no. Whatever will I do? And then it'll sleep like the bird phoenix for another 10, 20, 30 years until somebody with an actual idea picks it up and does something with it? Yeah, somehow the worst case scenario just isn't really that unappealing, frankly. And the best case scenario, they do something absurd and crazy with it and actually re-innovate DC. I'll take that too, honestly. As far as I'm concerned, there really is no lose scenario in this at all for us. And at the end of the day, that is frankly all I care about. What do you guys think, though, about DC moving to the east? And I guarantee you Star Wars and Marvel is going to do the same. In fact, both already have. But to a significantly larger degree than they already have. And can this be the savior? Or perhaps Japan is already heading towards its own version of the apocalypse. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.